Here we are in Rust, my undefeated quickscope 1v1 stomping grounds. I dare any of you to meet me here. I'll be waiting. But did you know that the entire time, right next to Rust, wasn't just a desert? There is an enormous river running next to this map. From the ground level, it's nearly impossible to see it, but even if you go to the high point of the map up here, you can sort of make it out, but it's very easy to miss because of the sandstorm constantly raging. Okay, it doesn't stop there though, stick with me. So if we follow the river up north, we'll find some logs beached on this land formation in the middle of the river. A little strange, not a lot of trees around here. Keep following the river north and we'll find something of a bridge on this land formation. You can see the bricks layered in. And then you keep going and you'll find a truck. And on that truck is an insignia. And it is likely representing the German Armed Forces insignia from World War II, the Balkan Routes. You'll have to forgive my pronunciation of that. Just next to that truck are a couple of destroyed artillery weapons. Next to them is a tank. Follow a little bit further and we'll find another truck. Finally taking us to some small wooden docks. But wait, there's more. If we keep following this river, we'll eventually find something of a very small riverside town. They've got chairs set up, patios, tables, barrels, even a ladder. Finding the giant river was surprising enough for me, but what is going on out here? Is there some sort of secret German enclave out in the middle of the deserts in Afghanistan? When we look to the west of Rust, we see sand dunes. This is what I always imagined the surrounding area of Rust looked like. Closer to the map, we can find a destroyed helicopter torn in half with the front spun entirely around looking back at its tail. I'm guessing this is left over from the campaign mission where you help General Shepard slice his melon. Not far from that helicopter, we have a flipped over military boat right next to the river. So if we take this aerial view, you can see just how big the map of Rust is. It's small, one of the smaller maps in the series. But if we go much further up, you can see just how giant and yet at times very incomplete the greater landmass is, the greater area beyond those map boundaries. And if we keep zooming out from the map further and further, you begin to see additional details within the skybox of the map. Here on Rust, you're just getting an extension of the mountains and desert of the surrounding area in the skybox, but on other maps you'll see that there are sort of hidden details within the skybox at times that you can't normally see. Rust is a great starting point for our exploration into these out-of-bounds areas because to the west you can see you have the sand dunes and what most of us probably imagined the surrounding area of Rust to be like, but then to the east we have all of these details most players probably never knew were there. Rust is noted to be at Site Hotel Bravo, Afghanistan, but it's actually not the only map in that location. And if we go further east, we can actually see some of the environmental storytelling that shows the transition between this map and the next. If we keep pushing towards these mountains, you can see some details right on the side of them. It's pine trees. We're seeing trees, growth. The actual environment is changing in the map. We can see quite a few pine trees dotted around the mountainside, and if we look back south, we can see a stretch of foliage along that mountainside, and we'll also turn back and show you just how far away from Rust we are at this point. Now, look at this. Here we are in a different map. You have similar looking pine trees, a river, potentially the same one, and a mountainous rocky region. It looks very similar to what the Rust area was becoming as we proceeded east. And again, we are still in Site Hotel Bravo, Afghanistan. I'll give you a moment to guess which map this is. I'm sure you can get it if you're familiar with these. All right, your moment's over, pal. Hand in your paperwork. That's right, this is Afghan. Perhaps even more so than the secret German village, am I surprised that they actually connected these two maps by geography features and foliage. Now at this point, maybe you're thinking, I'm thinking way too much into this, and you're right, but it even lines up based on directions. Again, the pine trees, the river, the mountainous region began to develop to the east of Rust, and then you have this same looking region to the west of Afghan, putting this geography transition area between the two maps. It also seems that maybe these secret Germans made their way over here because we have a switchback road system using tunnels to climb the side of this mountain on the other side of the river. And this river valley is much larger than the actual playable space of the map. You can see as we look at the two, you could probably fit the entire map in this one wide pocket of the river. You also have these somewhat comforting liminal grassy plateaus just below the cliffside of the map. It's not quite so comforting trying to get down there though, which brings us to the few ways that this game's maps restrict you from leaving them. Sometimes you just have physical boundaries, whether they make sense or not. Doesn't matter how much Dora the Explorer you're watching, you can't go through them, around them, above them, under them. Doesn't matter. In other instances, the game will remind you that you're not a bird and take you out by way of gravity. And finally, wait a minute. Is that Tatooine out in the desert? Is Luke Skywalker out there? You want to go find out. So you start walking out into the desert and then you die of, yes, you guessed it, radiation poisoning? Anyway, yeah, I think that's a Tatooine Star Wars reference out there. I'm not 100% sure. I've never been to Afghanistan, but from what I've looked up, those buildings aren't tied to Afghanistan. The original Tatooine scenes were largely filmed in the country of Tunisia, which isn't particularly close to Afghanistan. We also never see structures like those within any of the maps, which just further makes me believe that Luke Skywalker is out there sipping a glass of blue milk while he watches you go 5 and 18 trying to get clips for your montage. If we go a little closer to the Tatooine buildings, we can see that they are nothing but a mirage, 2D facades to trick you into thinking there's something beyond the playable space. And the mountains just beyond them that are a slightly different shade of color to the rest of the terrain are also just 2D. Here's a wider shot so you can see the greater map area, and we can see again the transition of geography representing Afghanistan. Whereas Rust we came from desert into more river and fertile lands, in Afghan we flow from the fertile lands back into the arid desert. And all of this is meant to at least somewhat accurately mimic and represent what Afghanistan is like: fertile river valleys with deserts and large mountain ranges. I'm not sure that you would find secret World War II German enclaves or popular Star Wars destinations, but you get the point. Let's hop on a helicopter out of Afghanistan and head over to Ukraine, where we will find Wasteland. This map really likes to make use of keeping you in your role as a toy soldier with that radiation sickness thing. It's covering most of the borders of the map, so you can actually start to walk out of this map in many directions, but you'll die shortly after. Now look at that off in the distance. I never realized this, but that is the Chernobyl power plant. This places Wasteland as a rural pocket within the abandoned city of Pripyat. The city was formed to house workers of the nuclear power plant, and we can see these Eastern Bloc apartment buildings right next to the power plant. Now, the city of Pripyat was named after a nearby river, and when we look around the map's out of bounds areas, we can't see a river, but if we zoom up high enough to see the sort of unseen parts of the skybox, we can actually find a river. We can also see a significant amount of what seems to be those apartment buildings that we can find within the map amongst a bunch of trees. And all of this detail is hidden from the player. When you're actually just in the map, all you can see is the sort of gray, cloudy, washed out sky. There's also this series of power lines that go in an almost U-shape around the borders of the map that lead us eventually to the power plant. When we get closer to the Chernobyl power plant, you can see the illusion starts to break down. It's not very detailed over here, but then when we look back towards Wasteland, the map, you can see how insignificant and small it looks from the perspective at the power plant. In between the two locations is this very liminal low detail space with this faint road running between them and some destroyed vehicles. There's really not a whole lot going on outside of this map aside from that failed infamous nuclear reactor sitting right in front of you, which adds to the hostility of the out of bounds area. No wonder they have all these radiation signs stuck up. If you leave this space, you're going to die. That's furthered by these dense, misty, and creepy forests surrounding you in every direction that the power plant isn't. You also have this ominous Eastern Orthodox church with this Soviet military statue sitting in front of it. You can't actually enter the church, but there is an interior with pews scattered all over the place and some spider webs on the inside. This doesn't mean much, but from a distance, because of the way the sunlight is aligned on the map, it looks like there are lights on inside of the church. Now remember, with the last two maps in Rust and Afghan, they were both at the same location, and we actually have that again with Wasteland. There's another map here in Pripyat, and you can also see the Chernobyl plant from that one. This time we're getting a different angle of the Chernobyl reactor, and we're also in an urban section of Pripyat. All right, I'll give you a moment to guess which map this is. Go ahead. Okay, moment's up. Turn in your papers, class. This is vacant. I'll admit I cheated a little bit. This is from the original Modern Warfare, but this is included as a DLC for this game as well. Based on the orientation of the Chernobyl plant, Wasteland should be over here to the west. We don't see it, but we do see those similar trees, and both of these maps, at least in this game, share the same skybox. This time we're getting that urban environment of Pripyat, and perhaps this map is called Vacant, in part at least because it takes place in the greater city that is now vacant. Out within the city, we can see these really cool worn down Soviet murals on the side of some of the apartment buildings. You can barely see these from the bounds of the map, but it's really cool that they're here. Just to the east of the map, we have this building that is based on the real life city of Pripyat. It's a real location from that city, and if I recall correctly, you go through this building with Captain Price in Call of Duty 4. Unfortunately, there's a lot less detail inside than there was for the campaign setup. The developers of the original 2 Modern Warfare games must have had some sort of obsession with Chernobyl and Pripyat, because not only do we see it in the campaign, but we see it reappear in multiple maps. Block, Shipment, Vacant, Wasteland, even Overgrown is another one that takes place nearby. Wait a minute, I just noticed this. Look at the statue in Block and the statues in Wasteland. Which is pretty cool, because even as a young kid, it helped me get interested in this location despite the Chernobyl incident happening well before I was born. I don't know if the devs know this, but they probably helped introduce this location in the event to an entire generation of kids playing Call of Duty. Welcome to Favela. This is in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. There's a lot going on out of bounds in this map. There's some pretty cool stuff. Just take a look at this angle of Favela first. It looks like you could get dropped in here and easily get lost, but when we take a bird's eye view and outline the actual playable space of the map, it's a lot smaller. In Vacant, we were in a city, but we were in a distinct location within that city, and all of the buildings surrounding were very clearly set dressing. But in this map, the set dressing on the outside of the map blends in very well with what's in the map. And while we're looking up here, look over there to the northwest. You can see a couple more favelas tucked off in the mountains. The closer you get to them, the more the illusion breaks down. They're 2D, very similar to the potential Tatooine buildings from Afghan. And then just above them at the top of the mountain is the Cristo de Redentor statue, or the Christ the Redeemer statue. This is famously near Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, which is in the map. But while we're up here, you'll notice the skybox for this map is immensely detailed. You can see a vast array of buildings up here, nature, a large body of water, and then when we turn around, you can see more favelas, but this time they're in the skybox. You can actually see these a bit from within the map. This isn't all just in the skybox though. If we look to the southeast, you can see Rio de Janeiro, the city, right there. This huge body of water that's a part of the map is likely representing Guanabara Bay, and you'll see a ton of boats inside of it. Now there's something interesting going on with these boats. When we get closer to these boats, they look like little wooden toys, and you'll also notice they seem to be reflecting off of the water. They're not actually reflecting off of the water though. If we go under the water, you'll see that every single boat has been duplicated and then flipped upside down to provide the illusion that they're reflecting off of the water. And it is actually possible to see this detail from very specific angles within the map. They actually did the same thing with the docks that are extending from the city. Also extending from the city is this long stretch of what appears to be hotels, apartment buildings, and condos going along the bay. You can see when we get closer and have a gun out how small these buildings are. They're really tiny. It's like being in some sort of giant dollhouse or a diorama. Back inside the map, we'll see some more instances like this one later, but occasionally you get out of bounds, inbounds, if that makes sense. It's not always just about the area surrounding the playable space, but sometimes the area within the playable space that you still can't access, like this doorway that's boarded off and blocked off by shopping carts. You can see on the inside of this room, there's a barrel fire, a couch, a couple of beds on the ground. It's kind of cozy, but it seems that they blocked off access to this room, maybe because it hurt the flow of gameplay or something like that. But it's strange that we can see into this room. They could have just put up a door or a door texture or just continued the wall through here and nobody would have thought different of it. But they added a room that you can't get into normally. That's sort of the igniting idea behind a lot of this video, are the doorways and paths that exist, but you're not allowed to go down. What's stopping the developers of this game from just putting you in a box? You're a toy soldier fighting an endless battle. Who would care if there weren't routes or roads leaving the map. Would it really be that big of a deal? But still, they go to the effort of putting things beyond you, putting things out there in the distance to make it feel like this map is a part of something bigger. Just inside of Favela alone, there are 3 roads that exit the map. You also have a gate behind the barber shop that leads to an extended portion of graveyard. By the way, on those tombstones, you can see the names of Pablo Escobar, infamous Colombian drug lord, and Sorot's Sarkisian. Sorry if I butchered that, but that was an environment artist that worked on this game. Who doesn't appear to be dead, by the way. They just snuck their name in here. Hold on a minute. There's something kind of strange going on here. That first tombstone doesn't say Pablo Escobar. It looks like it says Julio Escobar, who is a former professional Chilean soccer player. I looked on the wiki to see if I could find anything on this, and they also claim that the tombstone says Pablo Escobar. And then somewhere else in the trivia section, it says there is another tombstone with the name Julio Escobar. But I looked at every tombstone, and they all either say the name of the developer that I can barely pronounce or Julio Escobar. I don't know if this was altered post-development to remove Pablo's name or the wiki is just wrong, but Julio Escobar was born in 1945. However, he did not die in 1984. In fact, it doesn't look like he's dead at all. He just retired from soccer and became a manager. Anyway, in the northeast of the map, you have this really tight alleyway that seems overgrown behind this gate. This is the creepiest, weirdest exit to the map, and it's here for some reason. And I love that it's here. I don't know why it's here, but it's here. I was wrong. There's actually another gate that leaves the map over here in the northwest. It stops you from getting to this wall. I don't really know why, but that gives us 6 total quote-unquote exits to Favela. And before we leave Favela, just take a moment to appreciate this incredibly liminal space right behind Rio in the map. And if we do a flyover of this map, you'll notice especially the ones with some sense of elevation or mountains in the distance, they're not just larger squares with the smaller square of the map in the middle of them. They're really awkwardly shaped to create the external diorama that sits around you. From this angle, you can really see how all of the smaller pieces come together to make the larger picture. One last detail for this classic before we go. The blue bins on top of these houses have piping that leads down into the various homes so you can see how people were getting their water. You could absolutely expect to see these sort of makeshift blue water tanks in a real-life Rio favela. This next map is still in Brazil. Brazil actually comes up quite a few times. This is the Adventureland theme park near Sao Paulo. Some of you, even if you played Modern Warfare 2, might not be very familiar with this map. It's called Carnival. It was a part of a DLC pack. Let's get straight out of bounds. There's a really unique feature outside of this map. It's so ridiculous, but it's just insane to me to see something like this. I completely forgot it was a thing. Honestly, I don't even know if I ever knew it was a thing, if I ever paid attention to it. But as you can see, there are moving cars on a highway next to the map. This is revolutionary. Look at these absolute maniacs catching air on the road. Somebody from Brazil, confirm if this is what driving on the highway is like. The vehicles driving on the road here are all reused assets, so you can see these vehicles spread across the various maps. You can also notice a pickup truck driving here that is completely destroyed. Again, those from Brazil, confirm if that's realistic. The cars continue on to either end of the road and then disappear just before the road ends. Hanging on the overpass here are a couple of road signs that say North 2 I-95 or I-395, which is kind of odd because they seem to be US road signs. There is no I-95 or 395 in Brazil. This setup over here isn't just unique because there's something moving outside of the map. You rarely see civilization functioning from the perspective of these maps. You are consistently isolated and in abandoned locations. That reality still holds true with the amusement park. It is very clearly abandoned, overgrown, destroyed cars in the parking lot, not well kept at all. That's a fairly consistent theme with the maps in this game. They're abandoned. There's something almost post-apocalyptic about a lot of these locations. At the entrance in front of the dilapidating sign, you can see this creepy clown missing its left arm. You can actually find the same model of this clown throughout the map, and every single one of them is missing their left arm. This is a reference to the original Modern Warfare where you blow off the main antagonist's left arm. Just next to the parking lot, we have a freak show building. There are actually 3 of these, all of them out of bounds, and they show what I'm guessing are developers next to the different freak shows like bearded woman, lizard man, and incredibly long shoes. And again, we have another, although slightly moving object outside of the map. It's this Ferris wheel, and you can see it ever so slightly adjusts in one direction and then begins to switch back to the other, and all of the different cars on it are swinging back and forth a little bit. We also have this large dome structure out here of what I'm guessing is the ape house. I figured that'd be something you'd see at a zoo, not an amusement park, but it's out here. Beyond the amusement park and the roadway, we just have a whole lot of forest or jungle, and you can see this continued on in the skybox. We don't get any detail of a city or a town nearby. There is this other secret little detail I found. So we have this ride within the park called the Crushinator. You can see its stylized sign right in front of it. If we go behind this, just out of bounds a bit, you can see what was maybe a placeholder version of that sign or just an older version of that sign they ended up replacing. There is actually another sign over here near the out of bounds portions of the roller coaster that says thank you with the Infinity Ward symbol signed Soupy. Couldn't really find out who Soupy was, but you're welcome, Soupy. Perhaps this is a message to the greater Infinity Ward team because this map was released as a part of the final map pack for Modern Warfare 2, so maybe it was sort of a send-off thank you. Here we are once again in Brazil, but this time we are in the state of Amazonas in the city of Manaus. The map is underpass, called that because it's under this massive overpass highway that seems to have been destroyed. There are no cars riding on this road, probably a good thing. But what you will see up here, and it's something that I never realized about this map, is there is a giant, rapidly moving river right next to it. This actually makes complete sense because the city of Manaus is right along the Rio Negro, which is right next to the Amazon River. It's really easy to miss this river because the map keeps you at a relatively low point compared to your surroundings. Even if you get to a relatively high point, like the second story of a building, you're still probably going to have your view limited. But if you come on top of these... I'm still that same 12-year-old. If you stand on top of these buildings right here and look over in this way, you will be able to see the river. You'll still have a hard time noticing the docks that are up here with some wooden boats next to them, though we don't have that whole reflection facade thing going on like we did in Favela. Look at how fast this river is moving, though. It's very strange. The real Rio Negro does not move this fast. I thought maybe this was a reference to the real-life river, but that river is known as a slow-moving jungle river, so this doesn't really represent that. What's also strange about the river's flow is it appears to be coming from the part of town the map takes place in. Despite this map sharing a very similar environment style and even similar buildings as well at points with Favela, it doesn't have nearly as many entry or exit points to it. The overpass that runs over this little town doesn't actually have any entry or exit ramps leading to the town, so it's entirely isolated from it. We can see in this one parking lot, there's a ramp that would, I guess, hypothetically take you up to the docks, but you can see how much it's flooding down and even dragging some debris against the barriers with it. Aside from that, we have these two train tunnels that exit the map, but they don't go very far. This is kind of interesting because you can see them thinking out the infrastructure and purpose of this little village or town. There are docks up here and you have all of these shipping containers, and then you also have trains taking those shipping containers out or bringing them in to be sent to the docks. Then you have a part of town that is clearly residential and another part that is clearly for industry. Surrounding the map in every direction that isn't river is this dense foliage likely meant to represent the Amazon rainforest. You can see within the skybox you're getting this unique lightning effect to pair with the downpour that's going on. Surprisingly, we're back in the city of Rio de Janeiro. I didn't realize this map, which is Rundown, is also in Rio de Janeiro, but you can see the surrounding area doesn't mimic that of Favelas. I never realized how many of the maps in this game take place in Brazil. This isn't even the last one. The surrounding area of the map looks very similar to what we just saw in Underpass, and we do have a river or maybe a creek that's running straight through the map north to south. We can see the river continues on for quite a distance going north. The river way out here beyond the map just looks sort of normal plain. There's not a whole lot going on with it, but they do a simple change to the river whenever you're closer to the map by adding this layer of lily pads on top of it that just helps sell the environment that much more. They add this bit of saturation that helps put together this lush, overgrown environment, but then that's juxtaposed with these destroyed, half-sunken cars sitting in the river, which help remind you, the map is called Rundown. town, this is still a rough pocket of civilization. Those cars are a really simple and small detail, but they're important because if you just have the pretty looking nature, this can start to look like a fairy tale town instead of the impoverished area it's meant to represent. To add to that, we have these 3 dead cows sitting over in this corner of the map, which I always found to be a jarring and fairly unique detail to this map. You also have these Jeeps. You're thinking, okay, whatever, Jeeps, military Jeeps in a Call of Duty map, whoop-de-doo. But if you get closer to these Jeeps, every single one of them has blood splattered all over the front side of them. And outside of the map, in this surrounding jungle area, there are almost no buildings out here. One of them is just on the other side of the eastern road exiting the map, and it happens to be a duplicate of a building you can find within the map. The other one is this strangely placed small little shack right on the other side of a wall next to the militia headquarters building, which is stuck in between and even in a bunch of trees. Rundown is such a great example of very subtle environmental storytelling. For one, the ambiance here is amazing. It's sort of a low light map, which allows this ambient lighting to really stand out. But then all of the little details in between, in and around the playable space. There's clearly some sort of geopolitical struggle between a local militia and an invading military force, but then it does a great job at showing you the lives of the average person living here. We have this sort of communal living setup where people's homes are attached in one long row. There's a small church right next to them, showing the sense of community here. But then on the other side of the river, you have this cantina, which doubles down on that community, but behind the signs up top here, we have what appears to be bullet holes in the wall. On the other side of the street, you have a fish market. Perhaps they're getting the fish from the local river we were looking at, or Guanabara Bay, given this is in Rio. Next to the fish market is a derelict tractor, and then on the other side of the tractor, you have a convenience store with a drugs sign on the side of it. But when we go upstairs, you can see on the table, you have some Coke without the cola sitting there. Behind that table is a pile of bags labeled as rice or some other product, but you can safely assume that that's not what's in those bags. Perhaps they're storing their Coke in those bags to be smuggled. And the point I'm getting to with all of this is through the details, you can see the layers of environmental storytelling going on throughout the entire map. You have the militia and their building, and then some sort of invading force coming with more modern looking military vehicles. On the other side of that, you have a very tight-knit community, but notice how the map laces in the poverty. It's a reason the map is called Rundown. You go from close homes and churches to dead cows and derelict tractors. Following close behind that struggle, you then get the Coke at the top of the convenience store being packaged into other bags and bullet holes in the back walls of cantinas. This empty gas station that looks like a great place to do some sort of exchange. There's a criminal underbelly to this town as well. Like I was saying earlier, it's easy to think of Call of Duty as just put a bunch of players in a box and have them shoot at each other, but a part of the underlying magic here is selling a believable environment. This place feels lived in, like things were going on just before we got here, and we are a part of that interruption. Now, this is our final map that takes place in Brazil. That's right, Quarry is actually in Brazil. Somehow this went over my head despite the giant Brazilian flag on the side of one of these cylindrical structures. It's listed to be in the city of Santos, Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is a coastal city, though I think this quarry is a bit further inland. We'll probably spend a short amount of time on this one because the unique aspect to this map's out of bounds areas is that it doesn't have much at all. And I don't just mean detail, I mean there's really not a lot of out of bounds space, and this all makes sense because you're down within the quarry. You can't really see out of it. There's something sort of bittersweet about finding this out because I remember originally playing this map. It subtly teaches you that you can climb the quarry stone on the inside of the map, but all of this quarry stone on the outside of the map you generally can't climb on top of. So when I finally found out I could get up to this spot, it made me realize that the developers can set rules and then break them, which just made me start to wonder more and more about secret spots that I could get to, or even, again, getting out of the map. The bittersweet part is one of the seminal maps relevant to my interest in getting out of the map would have been one of the least interesting ones to get out of because there's almost nothing up here. What is kind of odd is if we follow these conveyor belts up and out of the map into this warehouse, there is something of an interior in it, and it has this like odd red lighting inside of it, which is strange because other warehouses outside of the map don't have anything of an interior or no red lighting in them. This looks like a very similar building that is within the map where you have this large anti-air weapon. You can see on the door we have that danger sign again and this red writing on the door, but this time the door is slid open. If you were curious, this cryptic looking red writing is in Russian and it says something to the effect of, "When leaving, switch off the lights." Kind of a bummer. I was hoping we'd get something a little bit more creepy or ominous like no Russian or something like that, but nope. I still love Camp Potato. Here's the skybox. Now normally you can't see any of this detail from inside the map, only the actual sky within the skybox, but from up here you can see we're essentially in a quarry within a quarry, and there's other machines and warehouses and things like that out there. Terminal doesn't get much more iconic than this when it comes to this game's multiplayer maps. There's a ton of details to this one. I barely know where to begin. There's a lot. You can see most of the skybox is this beautiful natural scene, and then look at that. There's a city right over there. That city is Moscow. We can also see this body of water around us, which is likely the Moscow Canal, which connects to the Volga River. Moscow actually has quite a few airports surrounding it, but this airport in particular doesn't seem to be based on any real-life airport. It's called the Zakhaev International Airport. If you're unfamiliar, this is in reference to Imran Zakhaev, the main antagonist of the first Modern Warfare. He's the guy who rips his pants. Around the map you have a bunch of runways, and we even have some signs right here labeling this runway. There are a ton of planes all over the place, but most of them aren't labeled. The one plane that's actually inside the map is associated with Flugruger, which is fun to say. There's only one other Flugruger plane out of the mix, and then there's one plane with an American flag on it, which happens to be the smallest plane at the airport. But it's not the only American flag at this Russian airport. If we come over to these police cars, you'll notice not only is the writing on the cars in English, so is the writing on the police barriers, and there is also American flags on every one of them. Now this is kind of a cool little detail I've never noticed. Off to the east of the map you can see these cranes near these other airport buildings, but when we get closer we can actually see the cranes are meant to be shown lowering a large part of the roof onto this building. Now this is where things get interesting. Remember back on Favela where we had that one room that was technically out of bounds but within the map? Terminal has a lot of that. In fairness, it's a bit different because it's still on the perimeter of the map's borders, but it's within the same building. There's a lot of airport going on that you just don't have access to. You can see right here on the northern edge of the map, there's this makeshift barricade blocking you from getting to this area, and it also would be on the other side of these elevators right here. By the way, under those elevators is an actual utility area. You can see a doorway right here. And then there are springs to catch the elevator if it were to fall all the way to the bottom. Right to your left, when you would enter this area, you would see something of a fast food joint, which happens to be very close to the burger town that's within the map, but this place actually has a menu. But then when we look a bit closer at that menu, you can actually see this is another burger town. The menu is a little odd because they have a chicken sandwich, but then they also have a chicken burger and a grilled chicken burger. Then right next to it, we have what appears to be an Italian restaurant called Chernobyl with an image of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, you know what I mean. In their bar, they have one bottle of alcohol. Attached to the Italian restaurant appears to be something of a convenience store, and they have two boxes of what looks like Good and Plenty's, but they're called Sweet and Sexies. Around this area, you can also see the small beginnings of what turns into a large blood trail with a teddy bear in the mix of it. This is all, of course, related to the infamous No Russian mission where you go through the airport, having a good time, committing a war crime. There's a couple other shops back here, but right in between where the alcohol shop turns into a candy shop, you have a couple of floating copies of Call of Duty Modern Warfare. You can see Captain Price's on the cover, and they appear to be rated E for everyone. The leading alcohol brand in here has a slogan of perfect balance. It goes down deep and hard. Infinity Ward's slogan must have been games made by 12-year-olds for 12-year-olds. In the bookstore, there are a bunch of books on the ground, and they all have names like But Ugly. There's a bunch, to be honest. The Wizard of Oz, The Sign of Four, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Hamlet. We also have Midsummer Night's Dream, The Origin of Species, and The Winter's Tale by Shakespeare. I think I got them all. That's the largest pocket of the terminal with an actual interior that you're not able to explore. Then over here on the western side, you have this tunnel that leads down a hallway that ends abruptly. There's also this bright sign pitching some sort of fake Russian company. Then nearby to that, we have the other side of this wall where you can see you get into this room near airline check-in, but there's not a whole lot going on in here. I'm not sure if this is a reference to something that happens in the campaign, but we have this flight board that shows every single flight being delayed except for the one going to Paris, France. Right next to that is this window that looks out into a tree. If we go up there, you can see there's this peaceful little bit of liminal space. Then there's another tree just like this one planted right behind it, but you can't see that one from the map. This fits with the style of the airport because you can see right here in the middle of the terminal, there's a tree here, and it's oddly swaying in the breeze. I guess there's a heavy draft in this airport. Now, if we go back outside closer to the air traffic control tower, you can see we have this area that is related to the end of the No Russian mission, where we have this garage we can go into, and it's also connected to this very creepy, incomplete room. Nearby to that garage, you can see we actually have another section of the terminal we can go into. It's sort of this waiting area, and on the outside of it, we have this very Soviet-looking star. If we go further east, we can find these two distinct groupings of buses in otherwise empty parking lots, and nearby to them there is something of a very low detail entrance to the airport. Obviously, the part of the map that we play in isn't where a civilian would normally enter the terminal, so this is where people would hypothetically enter this airport. And further to the southwest here, there is a piece of floating roof which looks exactly like the piece of roof the cranes on the other side of the map are lowering onto that building, but unfortunately, there are no cranes over here, so it's just floating. I think maybe somebody forgot the cranes over there in the woods. Okay, I have to be the first person to have ever noticed this ever. This weird little reflective half ball thing on the ceiling. Let's go up and look at it. When we look at it, it's reflecting the inside of the plane from the map, not anything around it. I have to be the only person who's ever seen this. I have to be. Well, aside from the person who made it. So person who made it. Somebody find this person. What's going on here? Why are we reflecting places that aren't there to be reflected? So you've probably noticed that a lot of these maps can get very specific on location, whether that be a fictional setting or a real-life city. Here we are in Strike, which was a map from the original Modern Warfare carried over to Modern Warfare 2 by DLC, and it's listed to be in the Middle East. It doesn't give you a specific location, but that doesn't mean it's not representing a specific location. Let me show you what I mean, because despite Strike being officially noted as just being in the Middle East, I think I can figure out exactly which city this map takes place in and a very specific part of that city. This statue with bird poop drizzled all over the top of it is very clearly representing Saddam Hussein. It's based on a real-life statue, except in the real-life version, he wasn't holding the gun. The real-life statue has since been toppled over, but it was famously positioned right in front of the Palestine Hotel and was similarly located right near a mosque. And we can see in game, the building right in front of the statue has hotel largely written on it, and there is a mosque directly behind the statue. So this is pretty obviously Firdos Square in central Baghdad, Iraq. Beyond that, there's a lot of interesting environmental storytelling going on here. We can see not far from the statue, there's this sort of torn up American flag and writing on the wall that says USA, go home. That same writing can actually be seen multiple times throughout the map. On top of a lot of the roofs and far from the player view, you can also see a lot of anti-air and mortar weapons. On one of the supposed exits to the map, you can see once again USA Go Home written on the wall right next to what I'm assuming is an American tank, and then right next to that tank you can see a lot of these low-res newspapers stuck to the wall. And when we look at those newspapers, you can see what appears to be a very destructive bombing of some sort. So even though they didn't give us a specific location officially for this map, you can see they're using a lot of allusion with an A to reference the US-Iraq war and the fact that this is Baghdad. The map is surrounded by a large urban area. We have a ton of buildings, and you can see that furthered in the skybox where you have more of that city detail, but then also to pair with that image from the newspaper, you have smoke rising rising in the distance from what looks like airstrikes, which then once again ties back into the anti-air weapons. There's a lot of environmental storytelling going on in this map, and it would be so easy to miss. We can also just barely see a waterway in that skybox, which is likely representing the Tigris River of the Tigris and Euphrates river system. And speaking of the USA, there are actually only 2 maps in the base game that take place in the country. The first of those is Highrise, which takes place in New York City. This entire map takes place on top of a skyscraper, so the majority of what's keeping you in bounds is the threat of gravity. Usually when you go through an unopenable door in this game, you get something that looks like this, just like incomplete, strange void area. But this door right here in the northeast of this map, when you go through it, you actually get a hallway. Fairly ominous, but take a look at this. When we look at the in-game map of Highrise, look at the actual space you have available to you within each of the buildings on either end. In this northern building, you only really have access to a sort of central and then western side of the building, and where this hallway is the eastern side that you really don't have a whole lot of access to. You have the same thing happening in the other building through this doorway. You also have a conference room inside of that hallway behind a door that you cannot open. This one's even more complete. Potentially it was a cut spawn point. And we have another elevator shaft interior. This one confuses me more than the one in Terminal because that one was glass, it was see-through. They're trying to preserve the illusion in case somebody looks down into it. But this one you can't see into it, so why is there an interior? I imagine most of these maps start off larger and then get scaled down to better serve the flow of gameplay. I somehow have never noticed this, but right next to the map on the other side of all of these cranes is a rooftop that has a pretty detailed area set up where we have something of a restaurant going on and there's a pool with a bunch of sunbathing chairs set up. It's probably the rooftop area of a hotel, but when we look down you can see that a lot of the ground in this map is masked by this really thick layer, which is actually multiple layers of fog, and occasionally you can see something of a street light and some cars down below. You can see we have this helicopter landing pad right here with these 4 blue lights on it, and they actually placed a lot of these all over the surrounding area. This pairs really well with that slow moving fog. It's a nice visual element in the distance. And the ground down below is just a texture. It's all 2D down here, and there aren't actually any street lights. It's just lighting that's been placed around to simulate streetlights. The high rise that we're on is actually one of the smaller high rises in the area. You can see we're down below a lot of the other buildings in the surrounding map, but beyond that, when we go to the skybox, you can see there are way more skyscrapers represented out there, and they are much taller than everything near us. Somehow, on a map called Highrise, if you pay attention to the surrounding details, you still feel fairly small compared to everything around you. And while most of it seems fine at a glance, if you pay attention, there are a couple of really destroyed, ruined skyscrapers in the distance. Now, let's go back to that helicopter landing pad in the map. It looks like it's a Russian helicopter. If I recall correctly, during the campaign, Russia invades the United States, so I'm guessing that's what's going on here in New York City. We can even see some of the buildings in the surrounding map area show evidence of damage and destruction, but these are almost entirely hidden from the player. Here's a wider view that shows how they artificially elevated a lot of the surrounding buildings to make it feel like you're still small in this really large urban setting. The second base game map set in the United States is Skid Row, which is a real-life neighborhood in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, this neighborhood is famous for having one of the largest and most stable homeless populations in the United States, despite being within downtown Los Angeles. There's a road here in the southeast that exits the map, and you can see we have the bloody Jeeps making a return from Rundown. Also down this road are some advertisements that are entirely in Russian. So we had US police cars in Moscow, and now we have Russian ads in LA. You can see on the front of some of these shops we have a ton of advertisements for what looks like movies, but there's also some ads for the game Call of Duty Modern Warfare snuck in here again. I've never noticed this, but on the western side of the map there's a rail line. This rail line continues across what is likely the Los Angeles River, but the rail part disappears. This takes you to a part of the downtown area with a lot more skyscrapers, probably something like the financial district being represented here. Oddly enough, instead of using what what they used for other urban maps, which is just sort of continuing that urban environment within the skybox. Here we can see they're using what looks like some sort of Middle Eastern setting where we have a small Middle Eastern village here and there, and then there's something large in the distance being blown up. I'm not exactly sure about the rest of this setting, but that bit of destruction, that texture out there on the skybox, I believe is used in at least one other map. This is a fun little detail. So in this middle stretch of buildings, we have an apartment. In a lot of these apartments, you have small rooms with some plants put in them, but on the outside of this one, there's a fire escape with a camera behind some sandbags for some reason, pointed down this street, I guess recording the action that's going on. Welcome to Karachi. It's not just a fun word to say, it's also the largest city in Pakistan and the 12th largest city in the world by population. Karachi is a coastal city, and you can see we have a large body of water right here. This is likely some sort of inlet or bay, maybe the China Creek. We have some docks right here with some wooden boats further out, and then some military boats closer to the western side of the map where you have one of the spawn points. Further to the west on the other side of the water, you have some sparsely placed buildings, and then if we go further south, you'll actually see a couple of warehouses and some oil rigs. This map is relatively large, but based on a lot of the surrounding area, I think it was probably a lot larger at various points in development. You can tell by the level of detail in some of these inaccessible areas. For starters, take a look at this empty lot right here and tell me it doesn't look like an initial spawn point. There's a lot more than that though. You'll notice down a lot of the roads that exit the map, the areas look fairly complete relative to what we've seen in other maps. We have that going on with this road to the southeast, but then you also have this building that looks like it's either under construction or deconstruction, but you can enter this building quite reasonably, and then there's a staircase that leads to the second level. Now, that staircase cuts off when it would take you to the third level, showing some sort of intentionality behind how a player would use it. They would allow you to get to the second floor, but then you wouldn't be able to go any higher. Just on the other side of the street from that building, you have some more scaffolding and construction going on, and right behind that, entirely invisible from any player inside of the map, is this sort of trench going on right through the road, and you can actually walk across these wooden planks set over it, but if you try and go down into the trench, you die. It's obviously incomplete, but you can see how this would be used in the context of a game, despite it probably being a really nasty head glitch to deal with. And even still, further back behind this area, you can see these staircases that lead up to something of a courtyard or a plaza in between all of these buildings, with a large chunk of the bricks and railing here destroyed. It seems like a part of the map, at least at one point, although it's starting to get more incomplete the further out we go. And then if we go beyond this area, you can really see all of the details sort of fall off. And just further north of this, you can see this area that really looks like it was a part of the map. There's bits of cover placed around, and then we have this large building with its face falling off, and then a duplicate of that building that was under construction. And further beyond that, you can see something of an empty canal running across the northern border of the map, and then this sort of leads you towards what looks like a moat that rides along the eastern side of the map. Then over here in the northwest, you can see right next to this restaurant with the red and white umbrellas, there's a road, and just down that road, there's another restaurant right next to that building with a very incomplete interior. And over here near the clock tower, you can see this long roadway that's incredibly detailed with all of these buildings falling apart. It looks like complete devastation down here. Down this road, we can see a hidden Easter egg of sorts, and also some environmental storytelling going on where we have these large gaping holes in the side of the buildings, but then there's a tub and a toilet on the inside. Now, right next to the tub, you can see there's a curtain, assuming this is for some level of privacy, but the irony being that now there's a giant hole in the wall. But then the extra layer on top of that is, who needs privacy when the entire city seems to be falling apart? Now, this is strange. If we go to the end of the road with all of the exposed toilets and bathtubs, and look at this building right here, we have a couple of windows. If we go inside of this window, there's a very dark room, maybe just a window display area, and it has a mannequin standing inside of it. There's a couple of other windows that look like this throughout the map, and they might have the window space or the display area, but they do not have the mannequin. We have to head back to this spot real quick, because after doing a bit more digging, I found out that this is a set piece for the Shock and Awe mission from the original Modern Warfare. It's missing a lot of that detail, but that is what this whole area was being used for. That's the mission where at the end of it, the nuke goes off. Heading back to Russia, we have another interesting geography situation set up between two different maps. This time we're much further out east in the city of Petropavlovsk in Siberia, where we will find Derailed. Our stay in Derailed will be relatively brief, but before we go out of bounds, there's a strange detail over here in the southeast corner of the map. Inside of this cozy little cottage is a portrait on the wall. That is a portrait of William Henry Harrison, the 9th President of the United States, is for some reason hung up on someone's wall out in the middle of Siberia. The only relevant connection I could find is that earlier in this guy's career, he wanted James Monroe, president at the time, to appoint him to be the Minister of Russia, but he got denied. So I guess this is how Infinity Ward helped him achieve his dreams. Given the name, it should be no surprise that there are train tracks running right through this map, and they do exit out into 2 tunnels, but they don't go very far. We also have these enormous power pylons that stretch off into the distance in either direction, and surprisingly enough, they actually connect to a substation within the map. It's kind of interesting because we don't usually see the distant detail connect literally and within the sense of design to the actual map. The surrounding area of the map and the skybox both include a very large mountain range, which is accurate to the city of Petropavlovsk. But what we're missing is the fact that this is a city that sits on the coast of the Avacha Bay, which is connected to the North Pacific Ocean. That's relevant because within those waters sits a Russian nuclear submarine base. Now here at Subbase, this map is also listed to be at Petropavlovsk, but this doesn't exactly map onto real life because the famous nuclear submarine base within the Avacha Bay is near a different city on the other side of the bay to Petropavlovsk in Vilyachinsk. Nonetheless, it's close enough, and that's still likely the inspiration for this map. And from this bird's eye view, you can see just how absolutely enormous these Russian submarines are. Unfortunately, once again, we don't have too much going on outside of the map. You can see once again we have a string of power pylons, but this time they don't even have wires connecting them. Other than that, you have this snowy wilderness that is along the coastline to what again is likely the Avacha Bay. Regardless, I still think it's really cool to find out that there are real world connections to a lot of these locations, even if there's a lot of fiction mixed in. They so easily could have just made a bunch of generic locations and called them this, but they seem to be drawing from real life. A unique aspect to this map is the skybox, where most maps have you seeing some sort of distant scenery, even if it's not visible to you from within the map. This one is just a very washed out, bright white sky. And no, unfortunately, there's nothing under the water. I wish I could have found you a giant mutated whale or something, but no. But wait, there's more. Petropavlovsk, they came back in a DLC in the map Salvage. Again, on the outside of the map, you're getting a lot of snow, some trees, mountains, that kind of thing. Most of the intrigue to this map is happening inside of this one house. On the first floor of this house, instead of having a US president, there's a cigarette ad with Joseph Stalin's face on it. Things get even weirder on the second floor, where we have some sort of shrine to Imran Zakhaev, again, the antagonist to the first Modern Warfare, and right on that shrine are schematics to the map Terminal. Then if we look over at this wall, you have a bunch of pictures. This is very clearly Makarov's base of sorts, where he was doing the planning for the No Russian mission. We can even see his friend hanging from the ceiling, who probably kept him warm in this brutal climate. Now, staying near Russia, if we head back west into the Caucasus Mountains, we find a state which is noted to be near the Russian-Georgian border. Again, the Russian-Georgian border, that is the country Georgia, not the state. Yet, on the front of the estate, we will find an American flag. And then on the second floor, we'll not only find another portrait of William Henry Harrison, we'll also find a portrait of George Washington. There's actually a couple pictures of William Henry Harrison. Somebody really likes William Henry Harrison. These are odd little details to include because despite the map officially being noted as in the Caucasus Mountains, Putting an American flag on the front of this building would make people think, this is probably in like Montana or something. Most people probably aren't thinking about it that much, but you get the point. We have another set of power pylons running through the map. This time they don't connect to the substation, but they get really close. And then there's awkwardly another 2 power pylons out here not attached to that main line, but these ones aren't connected at all. Maybe they aren't needed anymore because they have all these solar panels. Right next to this greenhouse, we have this pond with waterfalls, 1 flowing into the pond and then 2 flowing out. We can actually get pretty far out of bounds and out of any lines of sight from within the map and still have this peaceful nature scene going on with the creek bed and some cattails and stuff. It's pleasant. Following the waterfalls downstream, the one that stays within the map just sort of ends. It kind of makes it to this drainage tunnel, but just barely, and despite there being a bit of a ditch here, the water isn't pooling at all. The other waterfall is further out of bounds. It's pretty hard to see from within the map, but we can see that it flows into this, what looks like maybe a riverbed, but there's clouds in the riverbed, it looks like, not water. But this would eventually lead to this very large incomplete lake. Well, maybe the lake is complete, but the land around it isn't. I guess the land around a lake is pretty integral to the lake. So it's an incomplete lake. Our last official map set in Russia is overgrown, though it's just noted to be in Western Russia, nowhere too specific. This is another one that was brought over from the original Modern Warfare. Overgrown seems to have had quite a few cut interiors because almost every single house on the southern border of the map, including another on the other side of the road, has an interior, but you just can't get into the buildings. I say this because you can enter every other building of the map, and the only building without an interior is this one next to the gas station, which you can also enter. The gas station reminds me, this map is fairly similar to Rundown. It has an empty riverbed dividing 2 sides of the map, and these gas stations are really similar. You can even see some of the graffiti on the wall is the same. We even have the bright green lily pads here too. Again, this map is said to be in Western Russia, nowhere specific, but it looks visually similar to the Pripyat and Chernobyl based maps. It was updated in Modern Warfare Remastered to include a road sign right down here at this road that was labeled Pripyat. In the skybox, it's hard to make out details. In that direction, you can see something of what might be a town, but it's hard to tell. Another small detail to reinforce that idea can be seen in the visual language they use for this region. Now, we've looked at a lot of the power pylons and they change from region to region, but here you can see the power pylons set up in Overgrown are almost the exact same as the ones seen in Wasteland. And again, in Wasteland, we can literally see the Chernobyl plant. Now we're gonna head back to Afghanistan, but this time we have 2 maps that just might be closer together than any other 2 maps are, geographically speaking. We'll start here with Scrapyard, which seems to originally have been called Boneyard. Outside of the map, we have a bunch of warehouse buildings. All of them are actually enterable. They have interiors, even these ones over here that are being buried for some reason. This map is pretty creative because they use an assortment of plane parts to structure the actual flow of the map. This aesthetic continues outside of the map where you have a ton of planes and plane parts and even helicopters to the southwest, all separated into different lots. This map is officially noted to be 160 miles southwest of Kandahar, Afghanistan. Strange thing is, there's another map from a DLC pack called Trailer Park, which is also said to be 160 miles southwest of Kandahar, Afghanistan. They are both said to be in US Vehicle Disposal Site 437. And you'll also notice surrounding this map are a bunch of aircraft vehicles just like the ones we see in Scrapyard. What's even more odd about this is the trailer park looks like something that you would find in North America, and to pair with that, the big sign for the trailer park is written in Spanish and English. There's even a garage over here with the word garage written right on the side of it. That garage is just outside of the map on the other side of the road, and you can also see there's a gas station and another building next to that. Fitting in with that rural North American aesthetic, to the south of the map we can see a drive-in theater. We have 4 destroyed cars that all look exactly the same getting ready to watch the movie, and then the snack stand. You can also see there's some wood over where the projector would have been, I'm guessing. Nearby to this, on the inside of the map, we can see you have one of these Marley and Griffin moving trucks. You can also see these in some other maps including Scrapyard, But on the top of this destroyed one, you can see a set of airplane chairs, it looks like pointed towards the drive-in theater. And then behind those seats, we have this interesting scene going on. Personally, never been to Afghanistan, but this place reads a lot more American Southwest to me. The last map officially to be noted in Afghanistan is Invasion. Now here, once again, we have our bloody jeeps. This map contains a large set piece from the campaign where you're doing some invading, and we can see that right here with all of these Humvees stacked up along this bridge, and on the other side of that bridge, we can see a ton of tanks. Unfortunately, we don't get a really specific location for this map. It's just said to be in Red Zone, Afghanistan, not a specific city or town. Before this bridge was destroyed, we could see it helped people get across this river that is running along the western edge of the map. On the other side of that bridge, we can find a pile of newspapers that say the Infinity Ward Times. Infinity Ward is, of course, the developer of this game. We can also see a bike hidden behind this sheet metal in what looks like the top of a staircase to get up to this bridge, but there's no staircase. There's nothing connecting this part to the ground. Maybe these tanks had something to do with that. Behind those tanks is this really intricate looking mosque. This is one of those great distant set pieces. It doesn't have to be here, but it's really nice that it is. On the eastern side of town, we have a larger set of high rises of what might be apartment buildings or hotels, and you can see this puts us inside of the map in this sort of like lower central part of the city. You can see some of those buildings are showing wear and tear from the incoming invasion. We can see that reinforced in the skybox, showing a distant city with a lot of destruction and smoke fumes coming out of it. There's still a couple more maps set in the Middle East. We have this one, Fuel, though it's not set in any specific location, not even down to the country. This map was a part of a DLC pack, but there's an interesting little background detail here. So to get to all of these maps and use console commands freely, I use a specific console command called devmap, and then I type in the name of the map as it's called within the game's files. Usually it's the same as the way the map is titled in game, but for example, Scrapyard, as I said earlier, was called Boneyard. Well, for Fuel, it's called Fuel 2. There seems to have been a cut map we don't have access to from the original base game called Fuel, and then when they made this map and called it Fuel, they had to call it Fuel 2. You can see they were starting to get a little bit creative with the out of bounds stuff in the DLC packs, because just like Carnival had the moving highway, Fuel has these pump jacks out here pumping. There's not too much going on out of bounds in this map though. You do have this giant jagged mountain range which pairs well with the surrounding skybox imagery, and you can see some distant buildings in that skybox as well. We also have some distant power pylons not hooked up to anything, even each other, and they don't really go anywhere either. I mean, obviously none of them actually go anywhere, but these ones don't even trail outside of your view from the map. They don't really try to hide the fact that they don't go anywhere. I do appreciate how they set up a fictional company for this map, and you can see their branding all over the place. They're called Compy Corp, and their slogan is harnessing foreign oil. And then you can see on their logo here, there is a $sign hanging from a pump jack. And again, this isn't just some one-off thing. Their branding is everywhere. The final map is set in the Middle East, and the final map brought back from Call of Duty 4 is Crash. You can see this one is aesthetically very similar to Invasion. It has similar buildings, including that mosque. Despite that, it shares a skybox with Skid Row from Los Angeles. You could see this. We found it. There's that destroyed object in the distance, and you can see everything else is the same. Also similar to Invasion, though, on the side with the mosque, you can see there's nothing else around it. It's all just the natural terrain, and then to the other direction, you have the larger city surrounding the map. Last thing of note here, down this roadway headed east, you can see it leads to a tunnel, which you can't see from inside the map at all. You also can't go into the tunnel because they put too much tunnel in their tunnel, but it's there. Here we are in Arcadia County, northeastern Virginia. This is the only DLC map set in the United States, and it brings the total US-based maps to 3, including Highrise in New York City and then Skid Row in LA. This has got to be one of the weirdest maps in this game, or at the very least the most unique and unlike the rest, even though all of them span across different countries and locations. They could be snowy, rainy, in the jungle, in the desert, whatever. This one is just so out of theme, it just doesn't fit in. We can see on this sign out of bounds near the parking lot, this area is called the Garden Villas. It's an apartment complex, and then you have all of these suburban homes on the other side of the street. And once again, we can see those US police cruisers from Moscow blocking you from getting out into that parking lot. Also out there, you have these 3 handicap spots, but you can see they use blue lines for the handicap spots, yet one of the handicap symbols isn't in the right handicap spot. This is a really weird oversight. Right in front of those is this hole into this building that lets you see into the void. And the skybox shows you a very Appalachian terrain with these shorter forested mountains. This is our last official map. It's called Storm. This is the only map where we don't get any location associated with it at all. However, on these shipping containers, we can see in English a company called Oscar Mike's. We also have a fairly modern looking city surrounding the map, along with a ton of these row houses. Not to mention, it's gloomy and rainy. So my first thought was this is England, but then on these APCs blocking your exit to the south of the map, you can see a very small tricolor. I don't know exactly who these are associated with. My guess is Romania, so maybe that's where we are. I don't know, let me know your guess. We can see the row houses closer to the map are a lot more orderly, in rows, except for these guys who are just shoved in the side of apartment buildings. But then when we look out to the countryside, they just start to get really sporadic. Now, I think some of the other maps do a similar thing here with how they set up the city, but here you can really tell, probably because of the color scheme, how it's like the same chunk of city just repeated and then maybe occasionally rotated. Most of these are relatively low rise, but then if we look off in the distance to the northeast, there are 2 high-rise buildings. There's also a railroad on the western side of the map, and you can see as it goes towards the city, it goes straight into a building. Luckily, the train is facing the other direction, where it's just going to run out of track to the south. The skybox is mostly made up of these gray clouds, but then in the distance, you can kind of make out some mountains. And then also, given this map is raining, you can see that lightning effect very similar to the one in Underpass, maybe the same one. Oh, and also to the southeast, we have an exact duplicate, it looks like, of one of those buildings under construction from Karachi, the same setup and everything. There's one last map we're going to look at. I saved this for the end. It's not an official map. It's called Oil Rig. As far as I know, this is the only cut map that was left over in the game files with some substance so we can actually access it. Even this map has a specific location noted to be the Vikarevka 36 oil platform. If it wasn't clear, this is in Russian waters, probably somewhere off the coast of Siberia. There is an actual town called Vikarevka, but it's nowhere near the coast, so I'm not sure of the association. There's multiple tiers to this oil platform, but you're only allowed to stay on the top one. You can see if I try and go down the stairs to the level just below, I die instantly. I believe this is associated with a campaign mission where you roll up to the oil platform and then save some hostages. We can see some leftover details from that situation here in the map. You can also see that every single one of those levels is fully detailed. It looks like it would be a part of the map, but that would be an insane multiplayer map to have 3 different levels of fighting going on. It would probably just lead to a bad experience. And then just to the east of the map in the water, you have a giant submarine with Dallas written on the side of it. I think we have our first sighting of life in a Call of Duty map. We have fish down below the oil platform. Fish. There's even a couple of kinds of fish. You have this main school pulling through, and then you can see these other guys doing a little side wiggle. There are birds. Then you can also see some other distant oil rigs surrounding you. They're 2D, just like those Tatooine buildings back from Afghan. And then the final skybox. If you made it all this way, I don't really need to tell you what's going on here. It's pretty obvious. To the north of the map, under the water, even though there's no iceberg above the water here, you have like this underwater ice tunnel cavern thing. It's pretty cool. And then there's a floating door, maybe to a submarine. I don't know, some unused asset out here in the water. And that's that. 27 maps having their out of bounds areas inspected. This sounds like an uncomfortable doctor's appointment. I know this is new territory for the channel, but it's probably the first game that had me wondering what was outside of the playable area. I didn't have online when I originally got it, so I either played against my cousin in split screen, and if he wasn't around, I would just set up a controller and kill the AFK player, which got pretty boring pretty fast. That left me with a lot of time to just roam around looking at the details of the map and also wondering what was outside of the map. Now I know.